Hey there, this is Fred Basimo. I'm the host and producer of the Make Money and Have Fun show, where I'm sitting down every single week interviewing authors, speakers, coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, investors, millionaires, billionaires, you name it. We're going live every single week, and you don't want to miss an episode. And one of the ways that I'm able to put this show on is through what I use to produce this show, which is Anchor.fm. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest and fastest way to make a podcast out there. Let me explain. First of all, Anchor is absolutely free. They don't charge you a dime for anything on Anchor. So it's absolutely free. There's also creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor also will distribute your podcast for you. Check this out. This is so cool. It's one of my favorite things about Anchor. Anchor distributes your podcast to over half a dozen different places where podcasts can be listened to. So you might be listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever your podcast platform of choice is, Anchor can most likely distribute it there for you. And you can also make money from your podcast on Anchor with no minimum listenership. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. So if you haven't already, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Once again, that's anchor.fm, or download the app right on your phone. It's absolutely free, like we mentioned before. And if you want to start podcasting, if you have something to say, if you want to get started with your podcast, if you already have a podcast, this is the best and easiest and fastest option that I would recommend to anybody. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what is going on today? Welcome back to another episode of the Make Money and Have Fun show. I'm super pumped up. I'm fired up. I'm wired up. I'm in the zone. I'm ready to go. And I hope that you are too. Let's get into this.
My motto in life is make money and have fun. I'm on a mission to show everyone how to make money, yeah, and have fun. I'm all about making money and having fun.
So here's the deal. You know me. Every week I'm going live on this show. I'm strapping on the red jacket, right? This is like my Superman cape every single week. And I try to, dress to impress and put on a show and a performance and make this thing look good. But I'm telling you, today's guest, I think he might be outperforming me. This dude, Doug McGuirk, he has quite the track record of just credentials and some of the coolest things. And I was telling him before the show, he looks like a rock star every time I see him. He's got these awesome glasses on. He's got his hair all spiked up. He's got guitars in his background. He's even got a stuffed rooster in his background. So let's hear a little bit about this crazy guy, Doug McGuirk, and what we're going to be talking about today. So Doug is an accomplished entrepreneur, musician, producer, and inspirational speaker. He's run his own production company for 10 years, contributing sales to over 150 million records and multiple Grammys. That's going to be a cool story that we have to bring up. He's a partner in an international hardware and software computer company. He toured the United States as a musician. And check this out. This is super cool. He's a senior peak performance strategist and speaker for Tony Robbins. He co-authored multiple streams of income with Jack Canfield. Yes, the Jack Canfield, the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And most importantly, and this is going to be the most fun, he is a master practitioner and trainer of NLP. I titled today's video Mastering NLP, so we're definitely going to be getting into that. He's board certified in Neo Ericsonian Hypnosis, which I don't even know if I said that right, and I don't even know what that is, but we're going to learn more about it today. So Doug is well-versed in true life experience and he has overcome personal obstacles to achieve success. So let's hear from our guest today, Mr. Doug McGuirk. Get in here, Doug. What's going on, man?
What's going on? I saw your red jacket. I had to throw on my paisley silver jacket to join you in the formalities of it, right? To play along, to give reverence to the power of the jacket. So
I love that, dude. That's an awesome jacket you got there, man. That is so cool.
You. Threw it on there. Let me just get that.
Man,
there you go. Looking good.
Man, I always feel underdressed when I'm around you.
No, not at all. You look awesome.
Thank you, man. Dude, I'm so excited to have you here. So here's the deal. For those of you that are hanging out with us, we're live streaming, I think, on like 6 or 7 places today. I know it's all over Doug's wall. It's all over my Facebook page. Wherever you're with us, you can actually comment. And here's the really cool thing. So if you have a question for Doug, a question for me, or you just want to say, hey, write out your comments and we can bring them right up on the screen here. And we can answer your questions live. And it's a super cool platform that we're on. But Doug, I want to hear from you. What is your story, Doug? I want to hear it from you yourself, man.
Well, it all started when I was, so, the long and short of it is I've been so blessed. I've led quite an amazing, charmed life in so many respects. But the music part, that was my first career, was in the music industry. And I started out actually as a musician, as an artist, and I got into, production because when I first was recording some of the bands I was in, they never sounded right. There was something missing. I didn't understand like why I couldn't relate what it was in my head and in my heart, what was like kind of the download, my spiritual connection to God or higher power that I was trying to pull out. No one seemed to get. So I said, all right, I got to learn how to do this myself. And I got an opportunity to intern. So essentially what I did was I interned at a studio. It was this was one of the few studios that are still open in New York, on Long Island, called Coast City Sound Studios. And I knocked on the door essentially. And I was like, look, I'll work here for nothing till you pay me, to show you that I'm, worth getting paid. Long and short of it is basically worked my way up to staff producer, got signed by, the label that we had there. So my record never did ultimately come out, but it was on DV8 A&M Records. And, but what happened was I found that I really enjoyed participating in helping make great music, to help artists who were like me, had this something inside, and trying to get it out was a bit of a challenge. So it was really quite a blessing to work with incredible amounts of artists. And I ended up being the rock guy. So I co-produced the second Widowmaker record with Dee Snider. That was Dee's band after Twisted Sister. And
you a rock star? No.
Yeah. So it was brilliant. And we worked like Stabbing Westward and all this. And we won the Grammys. It was a really cool model that we had there. The guy, Rick Wake, who was the creator of it all, is the guy who discovered Taylor Dayne. And he had this great model that at the time was kind of unheard of. What he did was he would bring in great songwriters and producers, and he would produce as well. And he would have us produce these great records, and it would be final projects. Like we would produce a song and he'd say, okay, this is going to go for Celine Dion. So we would finish the record as if it was done. We would hire a vocalist who sounded like Celine, and then we'd have this finished record and then present it to the A&R company, or the record company, the A&R guy, and it would sound like Celine singing it. So she could hear it, the band could hear it. There was no having to use imagination. And by doing so, we ended up working on, getting a bunch of our songs on Celine Dion's records. We won Grammys with Celine. We won a Grammy with actually the Chicago soundtrack. And then I went off and I started working in television, and we won some Emmys doing some kids shows and whatnot. But I ended up going on the road, and I was a music director of a couple of the bands that I was in and produced and so forth. But the peak of my career is when Napster came out. So I'm dating myself. Do you remember Napster?
I recognize the name. Other than that, I don't really remember it.
Whippersnapper. So at the time when Napster came out, we're talking like the late 90s, early 2000s, it was the technology that was digitized. So you'd be able to make MP3s, and then people would share them peer to peer. So essentially what was happening was music ended up being a commodity that people could just trade and stopped buying. And it affected the industry dramatically. Sure. And at the time, we didn't have Uber and Airbnb and those things to go, oh, disruptor. It was like, what the F just happened? So that same technology also created, for example, what we're doing now. Like, think about it. 20 years ago, could we be doing this?
No, it's actually funny. I've been wanting to make a podcast for years. And like 5-6 years ago, I looked into it and I'm like, man, this is a lot of difficult, arduous, annoying steps. I just want to push forward and go.
Yeah.
And today, because of this platform, we can. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so we're taking advantage of it. It leveled the playing field, and which is great. However, at the time, people didn't know what to do about it. So the challenge for me was, what do I do next, right? And I look back, and now let me back up a little bit. My success in music is in large part I owe to personal development and Tony Robbins in particular. At like 17, 18 years old, I remember coming home. And I was probably younger than that. Not 17, 16, 17. I came home drunk and still living with my mom. And I'm like, Mom, give me your credit card. And she's like, what for, honey? And I'm like, just Tony Robbins guy. It's 30 days personal power, man. I want that. And she goes, we have that, honey. I'm like, we do? She's like, yeah, it's in the den downstairs. Never opened. She bought it, never opened it. Now, at the time, this is, again, dating myself. This was when Tony was on infomercials, like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I started applying it. And I was able to really transform every area of my life. I was able to quit smoking, quit drinking, quit, crack, like I was in a bad way. And by applying that, I made some decisions about my life that I was going to do music. I was going to make this happen. And so that is essentially what gave me the courage and the certainty to just walk up and knock on the door of this studio and say, I'll work for nothing and prove my worth. So I share that with you because that personal development part, Tony, he became very popular because he was the one who kind of took NLP to the average person, exposed. His first book, Unlimited Power, was really an NLP manual in so many ways. Yeah. So I got into NLP, and I'm sharing. There you go. So that's basically, an NLP manual. So I got into NLP at that point, and I started using all of the things I was learning in NLP to help other artists bring out the best in themselves. I definitely used it as a way to enhance my creativity, to enhance my drive, to go for things that maybe at one point may have seemed a little outside of our reach. Similar to what you're doing. Like, I'm just going to go out and make a podcast, add value. Well, it takes confidence. It takes certainty to go out and do it consistently. So I share that with you because it ties back into when the peak of my career, I had to reevaluate everything. And, the industry was basically being hammered by technology and all these crazy changes and studios closing and so forth. Because I was now kind of in the Tony community. Now, some of the challenges that went on in that, I also ended up, unfortunately, getting divorced, losing my house. Like, I had to start over completely. Right. And I was able to, again, through using that same tenacity, that same drive, that same consistency, I ended up getting the gig with Tony, like as a national trainer with Tony, going on the road with him. Ultimately, I started out as just in New York. I'm from New York, so we were doing these trainings in New York, and then it grew from there. So I was able to go on the road speaking. Now, interesting story, and I'll share this story just because it's instructive and helpful, because I think sometimes people give up when they get some resistance. And sometimes we can be really good at things. I don't know about you, but some of us are really good at some things. Would you agree that we all know someone who's like Absolutely. Yeah. And as a performer and as like, and also all the work I've done in NLP and all this is like, I mean, I got this. Like, I can get this gig with Tony. And I went through the whole process, and I'll share with you one of the things that happened. I had my first interview, and I was told by the HR director, like, hey, look, we're having some internal challenges and changes and so forth. We're probably not going to be able to follow up with you for like a month or so because of all these things that are happening. I said, okay, no problem. I said, I'm going to call you every Friday. And I know, you'll know it's me, but I'm going to call every Friday at like 10 a.m. and I'm going to leave you a story or a joke or whatever. And you don't have to pick up. Just know that I'm going to stay in contact with you. And I did. couple months later, I started going back through some of the interview processes and so forth, and then it got stopped. Someone within the company was like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work. And there's a number of reasons why they thought it wouldn't be the case. One of them was I didn't have any experience. As you know, all speaking gigs are sales gigs.
Yep.
No matter what, you're selling something. And this was a sales gig as well. So you go and speak and you do these trainings. And then, of course, you invite to participate more. And I'd never done that before. Basically, I didn't even have a resume. I owned my production company, and you could like look at all my discography, all the records I'd done. The HR director, when got that pushback within the company, pushed back to the company and said, no, this is the guy, because everyone else, when this whole thing slowed down, everyone else just disappeared. Doug did what he said he was going to do. He called every week. He left a joke. He left a story. We got to at least push him through to, get to the final steps. And that's what happened. I ended up getting hired. But remember, sometimes we get complacent on how good we are at things, and we may have some natural talents and forget that there's more to it. So I end up being flown out to California to Tony's office to do the final training so that we could get the gig. And I was given a script. And I had gotten a couple, so it was a little confusing, and I'd never seen the job done. And I'll full disclosure, I sucked. In front of everybody but Tony. Thank God Tony wasn't there, but Tony's son was there, Tony's brother-in-law, the VP of sales and marketing, and the rest of the team. And I bombed. And so Matt Millen is the guy's name, and I've had him on my podcast. He came up to me and he said, dude, what the F? And I was like, Matt, I'm so sorry. It's like, I had not seen, I didn't know what I was doing. I realized it sucked. He goes, you don't have a job. It's like, you can't, we can't put you out, and we can't give you meetings. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know, but now I've seen it. Now I get it. He goes, okay, I tell you what, I'll give you 2 weeks. 2 weeks to master it. And you got to send in video, and, we got to make sure that you understand what it is that we're doing. And, I did. I woodshed it. I mean, every day from morning to night, I was practicing. I was memorizing. I was getting that script down, getting the training down, learning everything about it, sending in those video tapes, overnighting those. And, I got the gig, and I ended up, being the top guy, one of the top guys. I mean, we would vacillate. There's a couple of us that would trade off being the top guy. But
and these were just speaking gigs?
Speaking gigs that would turn into a sale, right? So I would come into an office and do the training, and then at the end of the training, it would say, hey, if you like this, you'd love Tony, come with us to a UPW, the 3-day event that Tony does. And I share that because I sometimes people make things look really easy as well. And I've been accused of making speaking look easy. And the truth is I'm sure you get that too. Oh, Fred, you make it look so like you're just so great on camera, and you just, and it's like, well, I've also been doing it for 20 years. Like, sure. It's not just, I mean, there's natural talent and all that, but really I spent a lot of time sucking. And it
was funny. I was in a Facebook group today, and someone put a post up, and they said, what do you think is the number one mistake that new entrepreneurs make? And I just put real easy. They give up too soon,
yeah.
And I think that you hit the nail right on the head. I still remember my first ever karate class that I taught, which was really where I learned public speaking in this trial by fire thing. And looking back, I cringe at it. I have some old YouTube videos of me teaching karate. I'm like, oy, this is hard to watch.
Well, there's a great, this one time, what's his name? We married to Beyonce. Who's the artist married to Beyonce? Oh, I'm drawing a blank. Why am I tell this story quite a bit. It'll come to me. Anyway, he was on some show or whatever.
Jay-Z?
Yeah, Jay-Z. So he was on this show, and I was flipping around, and okay, when we come back, Jay-Z is going to share his secret to success. So it's like, all right, I mean, I'm going to wait. Yeah, but of course, the hook, right? I'm going to wait the commercial. Yeah. I sit there, wait the commercial. He comes back and like, okay, so Jay-Z, what is your secret to success? And he sits there, he goes, oh, man, he goes, what we did was brilliant, genius. He goes, next level. He goes, I'm telling you, this is the number one thing that just transformed our business and why we're here today. It's genius. It's brilliant. And here I'm like getting all excited. I'm like, getting to the edge of my seat. I'm like, okay, drop that bomb. Come on. And he goes, it's genius. We never gave up. That was it. And it's trite, but true.
Exactly.
It's just keep going. Your opportunity is going to come. And at the same time, you're building that muscle. I think there may be a little bit of the universe, of God, of whatever language you use for that divine intelligence to just make sure this is what you want. Like testing you, just going, okay, this is good. Just going to require, to whom much is given, much is expected. Are you going to be able to maintain, sustain, and continue to add value? And we're all going to be tested in different ways. And as we all know, again, another cliche, there's no overnight successes, right? Yeah. We'll see people, like, like they showed up out of nowhere. Like, yeah, no, but I've been actually in the trenches for, years and hundreds and thousands of hours. And I think the beauty of this technology and this ability levels the playing field on one level. It also saturates the market at the same time, which also provides the necessity for us to potentially maybe do things for longer periods of time with more consistency, because we are now in a red ocean in some respect. And no pun on your jacket, but.
Well, I'm in a red jacket. You're in a red ocean. So, it's all the same. No, that totally resonates with me. A lot of people, they see my brand, make money and have fun, and they think, oh, you're going to teach me how to make a lot of money without having to work. And I go, no, absolutely not.
Right.
I'm helping you pick the work that you want. That's the key, and a lot of people misinterpret that the first time through. They're like, oh, we'll just play all day and make $10,000 a day every day. I'm like, well, I can teach you how to make the $10,000 a day, but you're going to have to work. But it's a different kind of work.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
And that's a huge distinction. And I love your framework around it, because, yeah, I mean, in order to be sustainable, we've got to be able to enjoy even doing the things we don't like doing.
Right.
So how can we find a way to make that more fun, to enjoy the process? Is it, I think we've been on some calls with Walter and crew, and I'll see, Patrick in his, in his hot tub. Right. He's like, I'm going to make it fun. Like I'm on this call. It's not that he doesn't want to be there, but he's making it more fun. He's still showing up. He's still adding value. So that is a huge distinction, is how can we make this, like, for example, what you're doing with your podcast, it's clearly not just like this didactic thing where you're just like, okay, and here's what you do next, and here's what you do and what you do. Like, you're making that even fun. But you got to do it consistently.
Yeah. So I got another show lined up next week. There you go.
Of course. Yeah. It's just going to keep going and going and going, and continuing to add value, and coming in with that mindset of how could I enjoy this? And a little shift I'm sure you've shared with your crew is asking or changing the framework. Not that I have to do anything. It's I get to do this. I get to have this opportunity to connect. Like, this is a gift. This is an opportunity. This is a blessing. It's not an obligation.
Absolutely.
Because then all of a sudden it starts feeling like work. And you're like, I don't want to work. I want to play.
That was the whole thing for me. I mean, in so many ways, I'm the first student, the first customer of Make Money and Have Fun, because I started off chasing the money, and it all came crashing and burning around me. And when I climbed out of my hole, I was like, I don't know if this is actually the thing.
Right.
I don't think this is it. It's highly lucrative. I can make a ton of money doing this. I started off as a real estate investor, as being in Walter's circles. It's a really highly lucrative career, but it just didn't light me up the way that speaking and being on camera and being on stage does. And that, I always joke with people. I'm like, you could wake me up from a drunken stupor and tell me I got an hour-long keynote to give, and I'll give it, like for me, it's a different kind of work. My voice is still scratchy at the end. I'm sweating. I'm tired. It's still work.
Yeah.
But it's work that I want. It's work that I enjoy. It's stuff that I'm pulled towards.
Well, and it's also service, right? It's leadership. It's like being a servant leader. It's showing up and adding value and not making it about you, right? Or me. Like this is a gift. So while we're on the ride, it's driven and it's connected to that joy, to that love, which again, not to go down necessarily the spiritual rabbit hole, but when we're in that zone, we are connected to something bigger. Yeah. And that's why it's sustainable. That's why we could do it no matter what, like on the spot. Hey, guess what? You got to go on now. Okay, great. And it's like downloading the connection, the energy, the power, and the wisdom from the beyond, but we've got it inside as well, which creates the conduit through which we can then deliver the message.
That's a great way of putting it. I never actually thought of it that way. It's funny because I used to think of speaking as selfish. Like I used to always look at it and I'm like, all right, I got to create a win-win scenario. And if I'm up on stage, I'm validated, I'm recognized, I feel appreciated, I feel rewarded. And I was just thinking of all this stuff for me. And then like one day it hit me and I'm like, wait a minute, it is a win-win because I'm giving and sharing all of this value and all of this information with the world. And I think that that's a huge point to hit, that it's not just my thing anymore. I feel it's weird. Every time I read a book like this one or any book, I'm like, I feel instantly compelled to share what I learned with somebody else.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I got to call Doug and tell him about this. I got to reach out. I got to make a Facebook Live and tell him about this thing that I just read. And it's like you said, it's that connection between yourself and kind of the energy of the universe or whatever you choose to, call it at that point, where you're just like, man, I'm in, I call it full alignment in my business. It's this straight line to success at that point.
Right. And that is when we're also energetically able to navigate obstacles, that when we get whatever resistance, whether it's like, technical or whether it's actual people, I can't, like I had an interview yesterday that she couldn't make it. She had a flight. She had an opportunity come up. And of course, like, yeah, take it. Right now, if it was all about me and I was like, oh, arg, it would have been like, oh, great. I could have made it a bigger issue, but it's like, no, go do it. That's awesome. Great. We'll just, we'll do it next week or whatever. And we don't get thrown off our game when we're in alignment. It's part of the natural, kind of ebb and flow of life. And as we know, the most successful people also had the biggest crashes. They had the biggest obstacles. They, like, again, using, politics aside, Donald Trump became Donald Trump because he lost everything multiple times, and he was able to have the certainty. And again, this is not a political statement. He's as polarizing as he is. He came from pretty much nothing a couple of times, where he was actually in more debt than you and I could ever even comprehend.
Exactly. Yeah, so, I think that's part of the journey. Now, whenever I look at, like, it's funny, whenever I look at some like top dog, like Tony Robbins or whoever, insert whatever name you want, I'm like, I want to know about their worst story. Like, let me find out the worst time. I had a guy on this show. He owns over 3,000 units, 3,000 rental units. He's got like $30 million in assets under management. And he was talking about on my show when he had to pay $1.27 to get gas in his car at one point. And I'm like, that's the story that I want to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I don't share this story a lot. It's a little bit different. When I lost everything, it's funny, that company that we're a very minor partner in, the guy that invited me was the money behind the Backstreet Boys, but it's going back, obviously 20 years. He was the money behind
the Backstreet Boys.
Yeah. So he was money behind Lou Pearlman, right? So Lou Pearlman was the face that everyone knew about and all that. He was the name. This was the money behind all of that. And he and I became, very good friends. And without getting into the whole story, but actually I'll share briefly. the consistency again. I called him. Actually, it's funny. I called him. It's like 87 when I first called him. Again, dating myself. No, it's probably 97. There was something going on in the stock market. Anyway, I called him up, and I won't tell you how I got his number. I don't recall, but I come and say, "Hey, Eric," his name was Eric. "Hey, this is Doug McGuirk, and I work with Rick Wake, yada yada." And he's like, "Doug, look, I'd love to talk to you. Do you see what the stock market is doing right now?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "I gotta go." Click. And I was like, oh my gosh, right? And I was so mortified. I was embarrassed, man. I did not call him back for years. Well, then things started to get a little crazy. And now I hear him going, I got to reinvent myself. What am I going to do? Let me reach back out to Eric. Maybe he's got some ideas. I was thinking at that point, I was like, maybe I'll start a label. I had some ideas on like doing kind of like a Spotify thing. So I knew he would have some resources. So I call him up and we book an appointment. I'm like, oh, this is great. He lived in Upper East Side, Manhattan. I'm like, okay. And then like a couple days before the appointment, he calls me up and he's like, I'm sorry, Doug. Something's come up. I gotta cancel. I'm like, okay. So I didn't reschedule. I call him back, reschedule. Like within the next month.
Right.
Same thing. Couple days before, cancels. I think this went on 3 or 4 times till finally he doesn't cancel. So I walk into his amazing, like he owns basically the whole floor of this Upper East Side apartment. And like he walks me in and he's on the phone and he sits down and he's got his laptop on one of those little desks and he sits down, he's got this fan there and he sits down and he's like, he points to the phone. He's like, I'm on the phone, one sec. And then he takes this newspaper and he slides it to me. He points to the newspaper, to the article, and then says, this is what he's on the phone with. And so basically, he owned the last piece of beachfront property in Mexico, and he was building his personal house, 30,000 square foot house in there, and the government essentially took the house and the land and everything. And he was on the phone with the State Department to negotiate to get his land back. And the house and all of that. So he hangs up the phone. I'm like, wow, this is nuts. And I mean, this guy was like incredible guy. So he goes, Doug, do you know why we're having this meeting? And I said, well, yeah, I just like to meet you. So no, do you know why I took the meeting? And I was like, well, no, why? He goes, because you didn't give up. I owed it to you. I owed it to you to sit down with you because you just kept calling. And I figured someone like this deserves some of my time. I said, wow. So I thought I was only going to be there for like, I thought 15 minutes. Like I would have been fine with whatever. We ended up hanging out for 4 hours.
Jeez.
And just getting to know each other, super amazing guy. And so basically the long story short, this is when he then says, I've got this company and I'm raising money and blah, blah, blah. If you want to, raise some money, I bring you in. So I did. So he and I, we became very close and we would get together like once a month and have dinner and so forth. And this was when I was formerly married. And then one day, I get a call actually from Dee Snyder, and it's now I'm in the middle of my separation. It's just everything's falling apart there. And then Dee's like, "Is it true?" And I'm like, I'm waking up to Dee going, "Is it true?" I'm like, "Is what true?" He goes, "Is Eric dead?" And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "I just got a call from his daughter." And I'm like, "Dude, I don't know. I got a call." So I called Eric's phone, and Eric's daughter answers, and she's like, distraught and whatnot. And I'm sharing this with you because I want to give you also some pretext to like kind of the ups and downs and right. While it's not necessarily all financial. So it was like one of the most painful, like I've had people in my world die before, but this was like worse than any family member. Like it was kind of like that kind of ray of hope for me. Cause not only would we become great friends, but like he was my mentor, but he also is super connected, like, definitely, if not a billionaire, very close. He had like one of the things he taught me, the first things he taught me about money, because I had struggles growing up with my dad and around money. And then we all have these different things. And when I grew up, I despised rich people.
Sure.
I thought they were assholes. So as soon as I started making money in the music industry, I started getting rid of it as soon as possible. Right. Because I didn't want people to think I was that asshole. So I would be buying people drinks and dinners and paying rent. And I got thousands and thousands of dollars out that no one ever paid back. And I never asked for it. But I asked him, I said, so Eric, what's your belief around, abundance and money and stuff, right? Because here I am, this is probably one of the most wealthy people I had met to that time. And he goes, Doug, it is your responsibility. It is your duty to make as much money as you possibly can, morally and ethically, by adding as much value as possible. Because if you don't have any, you can't help anybody. And I was like, ooh. Huge. Yeah. So then my dad and I are, we have a better relationship now, but at the time we didn't really have a great one. And I was like, Dad, what's money to you? What is, I kind of asked the same question. And now I want to calibrate. Now I've got this really successful person, right? And he goes,
it's like a rich dad, poor dad thing.
A little bit. Yeah. Well, my dad was, the thing was, he actually ended up being pretty wealthy, but at the time growing up, we were the poor kids in a rich town.
Right.
Like when I was growing up, and it wasn't until later he started making more money, but he was working at a bank, and he ended up he'd be like the broker, the lender for like Jack Nicklaus building a condominium complex and a golf course and all. So he'd be like, I really, at 6-7 years old, you don't really have an understanding when he's talking about this stuff.
Right.
So then he goes, well, you remember, like when I would build those, I was just the lender, but it wasn't my money, but I would be participating in like the creation of golf courses and condominium complexes and all of that. I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, I love golf, but do you know how many homes we provided for people? Do you know how many jobs we provided to help build those condos, to build the golf courses and to maintain those golf courses and those clubs? I mean, I was creating and part of the creation of opportunities for people to live and earn a living. And then I was like, oh, I'm such a dick. Like, I can't, Dad, why didn't you tell me that? Like, this would be really helpful information, because my heart was always there, but I was never able to put it together. So when you were that, it was a powerful thing. So I share that with you because what happened was, so now, months and months go by. I'm actually getting a better relationship with my dad because now I'm understanding him better. Eric and I are tight. I'm raising money and we're doing all this
money blueprint at this point.
Oh yeah. And but I am in the middle of the divorce and all of that. And I remember when Eric died, I had to go back to the house that I ended up giving to my ex-wife. And I remember going up the stairs and telling her, because she knew Eric. And I'm like, just I want to let you know, Eric died in his car. It was a car accident. And I had spoken to him 2 days before, and we had scheduled dinner for when he was coming back from England. My now ex-wife at the time, we were just separated. We're in the middle of the divorce. She just was like, so? Like heartless, nothing. And I was just like, what the F? And then I look over, and the dude who she ended up marrying, slippers were under the bed of where like my side of the bed used to be. And his dog was in the guest rooms. And I was like, oh, man. And I went back home. I was living at my mom's house, or one of my mom's houses. She had still does. So this was one that I took care of. So fortunately, she didn't live there. And I was so distraught. I was like, what the, I got nothing. My career's over. My hope, Eric was like my way out in many respects. Like he was, right. And I remember just falling to my knees. And full disclosure, in New York and here, I was, a licensed gun owner. And I had this, I still have it to this day, this red Anvil suitcase. And inside it was my guns. I had a .357 Magnum. And I just remember sitting there on my knees going, like, what the F? This is what my life has now become. My marriage is gone. My career is gone. And the only person who, like, I felt like I had a chance to to kind of be a light and a mentor to figure out how to get out and actually create something is gone. And like, I got nothing, I got nobody. And like, I'm done. And I remember like taking that gun and like literally fractions of a second before just ending it all. And thank God, no pun intended, a little voice started to come in. It was like, like, no, you're here for more. Like, this is not the end. And I was like, well, how do I get out of this? And it's like, well, I've got to practice what I preach, right? And one of them is gratitude.
Right.
And, I was like, just talking to myself here, God talking to me and like, making that decision, like, do I just end it all? And, no, it's like, no one's going to care. No one's going to find me for a while. And it's like, well, practice what you preach, get grateful. And I'm like, fuck you. There's nothing to be grateful for. And it's like, well, come on, this stuff. Like, what could you, there's a trick here. You could do this. And I'm like, well, if I wanted to be grateful, what could I be grateful for?
Right. And
I was like, well, my mom doesn't live here. I mean, that's something. Like, at least I'm here by myself. I'm saving money here. I don't have much left, but at least, she's not here, because that would drive me nuts. I'd have much less money because I'd be renting somewhere. So that's good. Right. And it's like, okay, well, then I started, just started swirling around and asking questions. And I'm like, well, I got to get out of my head. And this is over the summer. This is like in July. And one of the things that had brought me a lot of joy in the past was serving and helping other people. And one of the things we did with Tony was the Basket Brigade. Now, by the way, this is what's also happening during this time is I'm in conversation, but I don't have the certainty. I'm in the conversation for working with Tony.
Okay.
So I'm still trying. I have I have something, but I don't have any certainty. As far as I know, right. I'm just leaving stories. I don't know what's going on yet. So I'm feeling a little lost on that as well. But I'm like, I gotta help people. So I was like, I'll do a Basket Brigade. Let me put my energy there. And the Basket Brigade was inspired by Tony, and essentially it's you put a basket together full of food for Thanksgiving, and then you deliver it. And I'd done them before. I'd organized them, so I know how to do it. And then, of course, what came back is, well, you have no money. I mean, oh, great, yeah, I don't have money this time. I said, but I do know people. I have friends, and I can just call them up and say, do you want to sponsor a family or two? So that's what I started doing, and it started getting me out of my head. So I put the gun down, put it away. I'm like, no, I'm here for more. And this is a good start. So as I started creating that focus, things started to change when I started making it less about me and more about we, and kind of going, okay, what are some other ways I can add value? And I was like, all right, I'm going to go start giving time, because I have it. I'm going to go to Big Brothers, and I'm going to just find a way. I have it better than some people. I don't have it as good as I would like, but there's definitely people who have it worse than me. So let me see what I could do to add value to their lives. So as this is going on, and I'm sure this also is the what happened to get the gig with Tony, we get to now we're finally through the conversation. We're in November, and Tony is speaking at the Javits Center, and I'm at the last phase now of this is how long it took to get the gig with Tony, is months. At the last phase, and they're like, Tony's going to be at the Javits Center, and Tony's actually the VP of sales and marketing is going to be there, and you could go meet him. Well, I find out on my way there is that VP ended up getting fired, and I'm going to be meeting with Tony's brother-in-law at the event. And Tony's brother-in-law works closely with Tony and so forth. So I go to meet them. Tony's speaking at Javits Center, and then Scotty's like, well, do you want to hang out and meet Tony afterwards? This was on a Friday night. And I was like, Scotty, nothing would make me happier than to meet Tony right now. But the truth is, the store that I've got 55 turkeys waiting for me closes at 9:00 and I have to pick up those turkeys because tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I have all the people coming over to pack all of those bags. And I would have to, I don't know if I'd be able to get in touch with everybody to postpone that to pick the stuff up. So I can't, I've got to pick up turkeys for a basket brigade. And long story short, I shared the story. I ended up getting the gig with Tony. And I guess I was inspired to share that because sometimes we think the only way people can see or relate to being at rock bottom is when you've gone bankrupt or, you've had your business and sometimes it's a little more than that. Sometimes we get emotionally bankrupt and we come to a crossroad that, if we continue down a path, we may never return. So I was inspired to share that.
It's a fantastic story. My mastermind on Tuesday, we brought up gratitude. Almost everybody that shared talked about gratitude, and it's such a big thing. It's transformational, really. I think, we talk about it, and I want to get into NLP here in a minute, just for all the people who are new to NLP, the new NLP learners or practitioners or people who are just curious about it. But, the idea of changing the question, you change the question to, if I could be grateful for something, what could I be grateful for? And I do that all the time. It's such an interesting paradigm shift to start to see, like, well, I have air in my lungs. Well, my eyes are working today. My voice works, all my body works. Like all these little tiny things, you're like, oh, there's wind blowing outside, and just all this kind of stuff that you can be grateful for at that point. It changes everything.
And we take it for granted sometimes. And when we just take a step back and get present to, to the little things, just being grateful for, I'm able to have this conversation. I'm able to, this technology. I'm so blessed that I've got a microphone. I'm so blessed that I've got the ears to hear what Fred's got to say and the heart to connect. It's amazing. It's subtle, but huge.
Absolutely.
Because that's when we're in that zone.
So let's talk NLP here for a minute. So a lot of people hear this buzz phrase, neuro linguistic programming and all this stuff. What is this really all about? Talk to me like I never heard of this before, Doug.
So one of the ways I like to start to describe it is, are you familiar with Bruce Lee?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And you fellow martial artist as well. Yeah. And what did Bruce Lee do ultimately? So he's arguably one of the best martial artists on the planet that ever lived. I'm not sure that anyone could really, it's hard to quantify, but he definitely set the standard and was by far, certainly at the time, and I think by any comparison, still the best, the GOAT. And what made him so great was he immersed himself almost completely in the arts. He lived it, he breathed it, he ate it, he drank it, and he studied all of the arts. It wasn't just one. I mean, I think Wing Chun was his primary. Yeah, but he expanded and he would learn everything. And one of the ways he would do it would be by fighting other styles, and that was how he learned. And he's brilliant. And then he created his own style called Jeet Kune Do. And essentially the way of the fist, which is basically the distillation of the best of all of the arts that he studied and had experience with. NLP is essentially the Jeet Kune Do of psychology. What the founders did, the creators, what Bandler and Grinder did was they would model the most successful therapists. They started out with like Virginia Satir, who was a family therapist, and with Milton Erickson, who was a hypnotherapist and a medical doctor. And those were the first primaries. But beyond that, they would find the most successful people and find out what they did that made them so successful. What were the patterns? And what it boiled down to in many respects was language, both body and internal and external language. And then there were some other patterns to look for, but really the filters through which they were able to do that is noticing the patterns on how one used their language. So neuro linguistic programming essentially is the philosophy and the study of the subjective human experience. And what they did in neuro is your neurology. Right. So your central nervous system, language. Really, this is where, I mean, our experience in life is essentially sort of described and given meaning through language. That's what separates us in many respects. And it's not to say that animals don't have language. They just have a limited vocabulary compared to humans. And then programming, and that is because Bandler was an engineer, a computer engineer. And what do you do with a computer, right? You program it. And then there's that analogy that our brain is like a computer, so you could program your computer. Now, there is element of truth to that as a high level. And Tony has made some additional distinctions, and he doesn't call it programming. He calls it conditioning. And, at some level it becomes semantics. But the truth is that when we understand that our world is given meaning and described through language, through the questions we ask, through the declarations that we make, we can then notice the patterns through which we're using them. How are we habitually speaking, feeling, thinking? What do we habitually do with our body? What are we doing with our internal and external dialogue? And then what we'll notice is when you talk to people who are getting certain results, you'll notice that the language, both body and otherwise, are usually pretty consistent. And the people who are getting great results, it's pretty consistent. What they focus on, the language that they use, the questions that they ask with consistency will guide them to the results that they're getting and overcome the results or the obstacles that they may get. So NLP is really the science of the subjective human experience. It's the science of achievement. And then to your point, have fun, right? That's the art, right? Making the money part, there's a science to that, right? Sure. I mean, you said it yourself. Like, I'll show you how to do it. Boom, boom, boom. There's a science. The art is, how do you enjoy the process? And exactly. NLP is that balance. It is understanding both sides of the equation and just putting it in a construct through which it is more easily communicated so that people can apply it with consistency. I teach generative NLP, so I'm more about teaching you the philosophy and how it all works rather than just, there's some people who will just teach you a bunch of protocols and procedures, and the challenge with that is you become reliant on the tool instead of recognizing that we are the tool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So how could somebody go about, can people train themselves in NLP or do we need to bring someone like you on, or how does it kind of come to you, I guess, in a sense?
Well, so I studied it. I've had multiple teachers. My main teacher, my mentor, and I train now, and I've modeled a lot of the way he teaches, is Doug O'Brien and then Tony. But I've also taken other trainings. There are a lot of books, and they're all great for the most part. Anything, of course, by Bandler, Unlimited Power is great. It gives you great high level stuff. The challenge is that, I guess, which is more powerful and going to give you more of an experience, riding a roller coaster or reading a book about it? Which is going to be a better experience of learning as you grow your business? Reading about it or going out and doing it? So the thing with when you do NLP trainings is you're actually doing the exercises, you're experiencing it, you're trying it out, you're getting feedback, a lot of role play and stuff like that. And what happens is you start to get physical mastery of it as opposed to intellectual understanding. Right. Training helps you fill the gap from knowing and doing. And so, if NLP is something that you want to do, I do suggest doing an experience with it, not just getting a couple of books or watching some videos. While those are helpful and it'll get you excited, they're not going to give you mastery.
I love that. You mentioned physical mastery versus an intellectual understanding. It's interesting for me because I always tell the story. When I was about 21, 22 years old, I read a whole bunch of books. I got a whole bookshelf of books next to me here. And then I started hiring coaches. And instantly I noticed the difference in just the speed at which I was able to accomplish things and kind of the intensity of it as well. It was wow, I can really circumvent years off of this learning curve here as opposed to just picking up a book, like you said, and kind of reading about riding the roller coaster instead of actually going through it.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. I mean, and again, it's like, now the visualization part of it, a lot comes in through that way, and I'm a big fan of that. It's just you need to have a deeper understanding, that physical mastery to visualize it, right? So
right.
The example, if you take I think they use it in the Navy SEALs, right? One of the ways they help overcome some challenges is that they teach you how to get out of, someone taking a mask off you and, dealing with that whole challenge and all of that. Right. Then after you kind of have you understand how to do it, then they put the SEALs in a meditative state and just have them visualize succeeding, visualize it, just, go over it hundreds of times in their mind. And they would put stuff on their brain and go, it's doing the same thing, right? So now they have an understanding. They're doing it in their mind, but they already have it in their neurology, how to do it properly. But now they speed that process up. And what would happen is the success rate of their final exam of someone taking their mask off and doing with all that skyrocketed from the visualization, but you had to have the baseline first.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there's some amazing things that happen when we have a baseline and then we visualize.
Sure.
Because what happens is, I think oftentimes, and you see this a lot of times, people visualize the worst happening.
Yeah. I remember a story when Tony first learned NLP, and I forget if I read it in Awaken the Giant Within or somewhere, but he went to a military base and he went to the general and he's like, hey, I'm gonna upgrade the scores on any of your tests. And so the guy sent him to the shooting test, and all he did was move the target up. And he's like, start the target, 10 feet away, and then they shoot it and they get this euphoria and they're like, man, I got this. And then you move it back and people were, hitting, I forget, he increased the ratio like 40% or something just by doing that one thing. And I'm like, man, this is a crazy, it's almost like this like magic lamp, kind of like out in the middle of the desert, that it was like, or at least the way that he describes it in this book is that it's this amazing thing that nobody else has, and then obviously it kind of grew from there, and now everybody talks about it.
Yeah, right. Movies are, The Secret and all of that, but the challenge with all of those things as well, like what Tony shared, is obviously you start small in that sense, and, celebrate your wins and create those confidence builders. I think, some situations like The Secret and other things of that experience, almost created an illusion that all you had to do was visualize. All I got to do is sit in my chair and imagine a big pile of money landing on my lap. And I tried it. It didn't work. Apparently, you got to still go out and do stuff. So, the visualization is a huge and important part, but it's just a part. It's, so I think, we forget how holistic we are and how important it is, and why your mastermind is so powerful, because you get different perspectives. You get other people adding their brilliance and they've been there before, and they'll help you, see something maybe you hadn't seen or you didn't know you needed to see. And that is, masterminds are probably the best form of coaching you could ever get, because now it's not just one opinion, it's whatever the size of the group is. And there's magic there.
No, totally. It's, it's an amazing thing bringing that group together and that synergy. And that's why, I stopped doing one-on-one coaching for that reason. Cause I'm like, I can only give so much value in this short window, but when you spread it out like that, it makes it that much better.
Yeah. So, Think and Grow Rich,
exactly. That's where it all started. The greatest book of all time. And I love what you said too. I'm reading through The Science of Getting Rich right now, which is another one. And I just went through the chapter on the law of attraction, or the law of manifestation, if you will. And I think that you're right. So many people have this warped sense of like, oh, I want $100, and they're just going to open their eyes and it'll be in their hand right there. And I'm like, you're missing a piece to the law of attraction. And my good friend, Dr. Greg Reed, said it the best. He said, it's the action in the law of attraction that makes your dreams come true.
That's the big part of the word.
Yep, exactly. So I got to ask this. You mentioned in your bio that you're a board certified Neo Ericsonian hypnosis. Right?
So
hypnosis. What the heck is that, Doug? These are big words.
Yeah. If you recall, when I shared some of the one of the people he modeled, Bandler and Grinder modeled as they created NLP was Milton Erickson. Yep. Milton Erickson never actually had any students, and he's quite an amazing man. He ended up getting polio and was paralyzed. So he lived in a wheelchair, and he started to really understand human behavior because he had to communicate and learn people's tells and how they were communicating through basically when at first just lying in bed, just being like sick with polio. And then he became a medical doctor, he was in a wheelchair. And he also was colorblind. And the cool thing about that is he wore like a really, really bright purple suit everywhere. And basically what happened was that was kind of the only color he could sort of see. So he was able to feel like he was wearing some form of, a semblance of color in his experience, but it was really bright for him in order to see it. I digress. So he was recognized as probably one of the most successful hypnotherapists, but he didn't do it the way, you've heard about mesmerizing, right? And right. Mesmer was the old wizard, and it was like, you're getting sleepy, right? And he didn't do all of that. He did it through conversation. And Milton also would be able to tell if it was working. He was able to micro expressions. He'd be noticing the color of your lips or the pulse in your neck or in your, like he was so in tune to all of that. But he would create shifts in people through just telling metaphors, telling stories, and he wouldn't do it through, like his inductions weren't like, okay, I'm going to count back from 10 to 1. You're getting sleepy. And so, like, he didn't do that. He did it more conversationally. So that attracted me to that style of hypnosis. I've thought about maybe doing stage hypnosis, and that would be fun and all that. But really the power of the Neo Ericsonian hypnosis is that it's so conversational. So you're bringing in a lot of language patterns. You're bringing in opportunities for change done almost covertly. People wouldn't necessarily understand how that all worked, but he understood the power of story and that narrative, and that by telling certain stories and the way you can tell it, you can get people to insert themselves into that so that they can make the shifts themselves.
Wow. That's so cool. Yeah. I was just recently introduced to hypnotism with actually like stage hypnotists. I don't know if you know Mark Usick at all, but he's a good friend of mine. And he was actually on this show, I guess about 6 months ago. I had him on here. And it's so interesting just to see kind of the parallels between human psychology and even a little bit of NLP and hypnotism and that sort of stuff and how it all plays out. And of course, like you mentioned, it's just super fun to put on the shows and do all the crazy, jump up and down and smack your butt and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and like I actually refer to myself oftentimes more as a dehypnotist, right? Because the truth is we spend more time in trance than not.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, it's really just interrupting that and going, no, let's be more conscious. Let's be more awake. Let's make better decisions based on awareness and connection to like something deeper rather than being reactive, right? And unfortunately, in today's world, it's certainly become. I think people are more in trance now than ever before, and mostly because it's a way out of the stress and the pressure.
Sure,
it's
easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Get lost in, think about it. Why do you think like Amazon and Netflix and people talking about binge watching, those are just strategies to zone out, right? Shopping. Hell, when you're watching, like, I don't know if you've ever been guilty of this, but you actually don't even watch a movie on Netflix or Amazon Prime. You're just favoriting movies that you're going to watch at some point.
Yeah.
You just get into it. Yeah, you just get into a trance like, oh, that would be cool. That would be cool. Okay. Right. And we window shop on Amazon. Oh, okay, cool. And that looks, they recommend this. Boom, boom. Right. And then next thing you know, we're in a trance. An hour and a half goes by. And you're like, oh, great. Now I don't have time to watch that movie or that show or whatever.
Exactly.
It happens when we drive, and now, unfortunately, with all the COVID craziness, is we can get locked into being hypnotized by the news and the what to do or not to do, or then you also get hypnotized into arguing with the news, and it's you can't win for trying. Yeah. So really, that's it's about being aware. Yeah, exactly. Right?
I just turn the news off because it's all negativity anyway. I'm like, oh, there were 7 murders this morning. Great. That's what I need to know about.
Yeah, no one buys the newspaper, when it says 70 degrees and sunny. And the challenge with 24-hour news is in order to keep you watching, there's got to be constant fear and pain. Otherwise, you won't watch. And to that point, so I worked with Tony when I don't know if you knew he had a series called Breakthrough.
I don't think so. No, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, very few people know this because it only aired twice. So it was an hour-long show where he basically went in and he recorded 7 of them. And he found these people who just had incredible challenges. Like one was a quadriplegic where the day of his wedding, he dove into the pool, broke his neck, and he was essentially at this point suicidal because, his poor wife is having to basically do everything for him. He can't move. He's, essentially quadriplegic, and he wants to end it all. And Tony comes in and he does Tony's thing. And over this, hour-long thing, he helps transform this guy's life and this family's life. Shows him how, with what little movement he can do, helps him play murder ball and actually go like a dune buggy race and stuff. Figures, there's places that help people do this. 2 episodes aired. That was it. And you go, why? No one wanted to watch a feel-good show. There's too much positivity. There wasn't enough drama. It wasn't enough pain. There wasn't enough stupidity. It was actually, and I think, and this is the maybe as I'm thinking aloud. Have you ever been guilty of this? Your life, you're doing great, and then you see somebody who's not doing as great and you mute yourself a little bit. You play a little bit smaller because you don't want them to feel bad because you're crushing it. And they're like, oh man, I know you're having a tough time. I don't want to be celebrating my awesomeness right now with you. It's just, this is weird because we have hearts. We don't, I wonder if we've been so conditioned in many ways that watching people succeed is actually making people feel bad. And they won't tune in because they're like, I don't want to watch some person do great. Like my life is miserable. It's going to make me feel worse about myself because here, this guy is quadriplegic is turning their life around and I can't stop putting Oreos in my mouth. I don't know. I may be opening a larger can of worms, but you'd think that people and that's the thing. Here we are. We live in a silo. We live in a vacuum, right? Because I would hallucinate that you're like me, that almost everybody in your world is heart-centered, spiritually grounded, go-getter, who adds value, who's doing well, who's got money, who's got some level of success. And even when they don't go, woe is me.
Pretty much, yeah. Hit the nail on the head.
The rest of the world lives in a different vacuum. And so this is that weird thing, right? Because we, as caring people, at some point, we're there for people like, hey, I want to help you, and then at some point, like, well, either you're getting on the, this train of success and happiness and joy, or we're leaving the station without you because, we'll help you. We'll get you on the train, but you got to be on the train. If you start, going into the Eeyore mode, you're going to get a couple strikes and then you're out. Like we're going to, try and interrupt your pattern and get you back on track. And if not, we can't, it's for our own survival.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. That's spot on, I think, in my opinion. But again, it's something we can never really tell. It's funny for me because sometimes I'm so positive that I'm like, I should probably acknowledge that there is bad stuff out there at some point. But it's also just, it makes me happier just to be, to be like, crap, everything's crumbling down. But you know what? There's this one great thing out of this scenario.
Well, and so, yes. Again, I don't think either of us at this point are saying be Pollyannic. Obviously, we got to we're going to jump out of a plane. We're going to put on a parachute, right? We're not going to be stupid.
Sure.
But we're still going to jump out of the plane.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's that willingness to be adventurous, that willingness to challenge ourselves, that willingness to, do things, add value, put ourselves out there, be willing to get vulnerable, be willing to be seen making a mistake, be willing to, try on something and then learn as we go. One of the battles I think probably people in our world may deal with at times is perfectionism, right? Where they want to get it right and so forth. But we're, I think, still willing to go out there and try stuff and recognize that, we're human, and that, when we do fall down, we can laugh about it and also get feedback and say, hey, wow, Fred, this crazy thing just happened. What did you notice about it? Like, what am I missing? Do you see something I could learn from this? And that's what the mastermind is about. Also, it may be, hey, before you jump out of that plane, here's another thing some people forget to check. Do you have that backup parachute? You're like, ooh, you know what? Let me double check that, right? So by surrounding yourself in an environment that is supportive, and also receive that support, not as like criticism, but genuine, heartfelt advice. Say, hey, like what you're doing is awesome. And having done that before, here's a distinction. Here's perhaps something you may want to address. And sometimes we don't like hearing it. Sometimes people may go, you know what, too soon. I wouldn't jump out of the plane yet. You didn't get the training. You didn't get whatever. I would go back to the drawing board a little bit. You know what? Maybe you're good for a 10,000 foot, but I'm not sure I go to 18,000 feet just yet. Here's why, right? And not take it like, oh, you don't think I could do it? Be like, oh, okay, let me think about that. Okay, cool. You have my best interest at heart. And I think that's probably one of the things we could also start assuming the best out of people might serve us well.
Exactly.
That when people are offering their advice and it may not be appropriate or right, but it's not that they're trying to hurt us. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was first made the decision to get into real estate investing, and I called my mom. We were just talking, and I was like, oh yeah, we're looking at this property and I'm going to buy it. This is when we first started. And she was like, oh, real estate. Yeah. Yeah, you remember, when you were like 15, like I had that property in Hempstead, and man, there's all these problems, and the tenant destroyed the place. It was like $5,000 of damage, and the headache of being a landlord, and it was such a, oh man. Okay, well, be careful. Good luck. Like, it sounds kind of defeatist, really, not like, oh, that's going to be awesome. I'd love to support you if you have any questions. I'm here for you. It was like, and now was she trying to be negative and crush my? No, she was just running her model. Yep.
Yeah, she was giving you her blueprint. At that point.
All right. So when you assume the best of people, I don't have to go, oh, F you, mom. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's your blueprint. Right. That's your model of the world. It's cool.
It's interesting because you basically just described my mastermind and how I try to basically run my mastermind. I actually had a guest on here a couple of weeks ago. He called it sacred ground. Mm-hmm. It's like when you're in there, you're in this place of sacred ground in a sense. And I love that. And we subscribe to what we call a hand in the sand mentality, which is what you just described, which is this idea. If you picked up sand on the beach, some of it's going to sit in the palm of your hand and some of it's going to slip through your fingertips. And so if you're in the mastermind, you're receiving feedback and you don't really agree with, like the feedback, or it doesn't really resonate with you, instead of, causing an altercation or an argument or a prolonged discussion, you just kind of say thank you and let that sand slip through your fingertips at that point and move on. And the idea behind that was I wanted to bring people into the mastermind that were the right fit for it. Because like you mentioned, we're living in two different types of vacuums. Some people can take on that role of the teacher and the student, and some people can't. and that's kind of like the telltale sign there of like, well, what do you mean? And now it becomes
let me tell you why you're wrong.
Yeah. And when we're out there and we're seeking counsel as opposed to just listening to opinion because of all the people that were hand selected to be in the room, it's a different environment at that point. And it just builds everybody from there as opposed to diminishing everybody.
Right. Well, and by going into it with that philosophy, that understanding, this is sacred ground, that, we're assuming the best out of everybody, that we're here for an aligned purpose, that we're all hoping, wishing, and supporting the absolute best success holistically in every area of your life. And we are going to be here to also point out the potential challenges of the upside that you may need to prepare,
Yep.
And that's an interesting question that sometimes people don't take into consideration. Like, well, how is the rest of my life going to be affected by this success in what I'm doing? And would this be a helpful conversation to have? Like, hey, you're going to have haters. You may have some people in your family not understand you, and you need to be prepared on how you're going to lovingly receive that conversation.
Totally. Dude, this has been awesome stuff, man. I love this. I knew as soon as you put the jacket on, I'm like, this is going to be an awesome show.
Yeah, it's
Look at it. We're over an hour already, man. We're like an hour and 15 minutes into this. I love it. So here's the thing, man. Let's start to wrap this up a little bit. I want to hear what are your words of wisdom, your inspiration. What parting thoughts do you want to give our guests today who are listening? And I'll give you the floor for this.
One of the things that we tend to forget is our divinity, our sacred contribution. That there's something bigger out there. And I don't know what language you want to call it. It's up to you. It's your relationship. It's bigger than just words. So whether it's, God, Mother Nature, divine intelligence, universal principle, whatever that is, always remember that there is that energy there for you, that otherness. And when we are in the zone, when we are connected, when we're living on purpose, when we are focused on serving a higher good that is mutually beneficial. I'm not saying be a martyr. Add your value and own your value, and also connect it to something bigger and recognize that in the opportunity and in other people. And I don't want to, seem like a guru, sounding, namaste, you think the old yogis and all that, but that term of I see the light in you, that light in you recognizes the light in me, the light in me recognizes the light in you or the God in you or what have you, is instructive. It's powerful. We're given opportunities every day to create miracles, small and large, and the power of receiving that you are worthy, that you are powerful. Marianne Williamson said our deepest fear is not that we're not worthy, it's that we're powerful beyond measure. And it's okay to own your majesty, own your rock, and serve from that place. Add that value so that you can receive. And the only thing stopping you and I from getting to that next level is that belief in ourselves, that feeling of worth, or that we're going to be found out. And all you're going to be found out is that you're human, and that you make mistakes, and that you have something to offer. Surround yourself with the biggest gift I gave myself, and Fred opens up the door with his mastermind, is surround yourself that their normal is what you aspire to. So, man, if you're the smartest person in the room, find another room. If you're the most creative person in the room, find another room. Create that environment to challenge you to greatness, that allows you to open yourself up even more to possibility, to that divinity and beyond. So yeah, live in a space of love and gratitude. own your majesty and take advantage of the opportunities when they come your way.
I love it, dude. That was amazing. I got chills. I think I got goosebumps going on underneath this red jacket, man.
I should have put on the reverb.
Whoa. We needed that from the beginning. What have we been doing this whole time? Dude, I got to mention, like, this, you have the most interesting looking microphone. Like, I look at it and I'm like, what's that little thing going to do? And then you speak and it's like God's voice just like fills the room or something.
Well, yeah, you could thank Blue.
It's this angelic kind of thing going on.
Well, it's the reverb.
There it is. I love it, man. Dude, so how can people get in contact with you, Doug?
So
time to reach you.
Yeah, great. Well, obviously, here on Facebook, you could go to, I think, check me out, find me here. If you go to ifreedomhacknow.com, I've got a free training there about essentially breaking free to your next best level. Basically the tap into your opportunities to grow, to earn more, to love more, and to ultimately be more, to be your authentic self, to be that majestic rock star that you truly are. And just sometimes we let ourselves get in our way and get reinforced by others agreeing. So when we, break free from those ultimate chains, we are on a path to next level. So ifreedomhacknow.com is a great way to start the conversation, or just find me here on Facebook or LinkedIn.
I love it. Dude, this has been awesome, Doug. Thank you so much for being here. I think this has been one of the most fun shows I've had so far.
I appreciate that. Me too. I got to have you on mine next.
Yeah, definitely. Let me know, man. Anytime you're ready.
Yeah, that's the realdealon.com. It's called The Real Deal On. And if you go to realdealon.com, you could also find that.
Dealon.com. Let's get the link going on. Bam!
Boom!
There it is. Cool.
Love it when a plan comes together.
I love it, man. Doug, thank you so much for being here. Everybody who's still tuning in, we will see you guys again very, very soon. Have a good one, everybody.
God bless.